he picks the slow control deck of the format and then puts a lot of tap-out elements into it. You know, when he plays Esper Control in Standard, he plays full sets of Blood Barons. When he plays Miracles and Legacy, he adds Keranos, God of Storms to the deck.
I like it.
It is certainly, he puts his own mark on his decks.
Absolutely. This will be a brainstorm here for Shaheen. You saw Brian start off with the Sensei's Divining top. Again, these two guys, very, very good friends, have grown up around each other playing Magic for a long time, and only one of them can make the top 8 here. We'll see who it's going to be, the Esper Master or BBD with his Miracles.
And it's really interesting, as much as these are different archetypes, Brian's almost a hybrid between the two. You know, he's playing 2 Stoneforge, not 4 Stoneforge like Shaheen. He does have the equipment package, only has 3 counterbalance. So, you know, in a way, he's sliding the spectrum down towards Stoneblade. And then Shaheen goes the other way as well. You know, he plays 3 Jaces in his Stoneblade deck and starts to play more counter spells. So a lot of similarity actually here.
It's a Thoughtseize now for Shaheen. He wants to see exactly what Brian is working with. We'll see if Brian lets him get a peek at the hand. Doesn't look like he has a Force of Will. So Brian's hand, he's got a counterspell, Preordain, Source of Plowshares, Stoneforge Mystic, along with the Plains and an Arid Mesa. Shaheen will give his deck a long shuffle after that, brainstorming and fetch landing. And now I have to figure out what card he wants to take, as Brian with the sly grin on his face.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty great hand for Brian. You see he has one of his own marks on the deck. You see Preordain in there. That's not a standard card in Miracles, but I do like the theory behind it that Brian, when talking with Brian about it, you know, that basically Miracles is a deck that has blue mana. It has a lot of turns where it doesn't tap out. You know, playing a card like Preordain or Ponder is pretty reasonable in this kind of shell.
Brian gonna maybe spin the top on upkeep. I think he's at least thinking about it. Doesn't look like he's drawn a card just yet.
Of note here, big difference between the decks is that Brian can establish a counterbalance lock, whereas Shaheen can't. And I'd say that's probably the most important difference here. It puts some urgency on Shaheen's side. As far as Planeswalkers and, you know, the late game is concerned, they actually have the same number of Jaces.
Brian actually did draw a card. No need to spin the top on upkeep. Thus Preordain. Both cards go to the bottom. Takes the card on top. Gonna play an Arid Mesa and kick it back over to Soorani, who will draw a card. You can see his mana over there. He's got 2 copies of Underground Sea in play. This is a Karakas. That's a Snapcaster Mage. We'll see if he wants to flash back Thoughtseize or Brainstorm, and it will be Thoughtseize. Something you see from Esper Stoneblade a lot.
Yeah. A lot of tap-out play in the way the two players have built their decks. You see on Brian's hand, Shaheen's going to he's taking away all the pure control elements and just leaving Brian with a lot of board control.
Yeah, there's a real chance here that Shaheen is trying to open the door for a Jace the Mind Sculptor. Wouldn't surprise me one bit as Brian's going to sacrifice the Arid Mesa, go get himself a Volcanic Island. Again, you do see his hand. Terminus, 2 Source of Plowshares, and a Plains.
Shaheen, no stranger to having lots of tap-out threats like Planeswalkers. Probably known for his love of that card type. You know, Swords, Terminus, these are great things against aggro decks, but against a Planeswalker-heavy strategy, they are not great answers.
His nickname is the Expensive Sorcery Master. That's what his friends call him, and for good reason. Brian will spin the top and draw a card. Now it's a copy of Brainstorm. There's a Plains, pass the turn back over to Soorani, who will draw a card.
And I do feel like Shaheen actually has to tap out in this matchup because Brian has counterbalances available in his deck, whereas Shaheen has cards like Lingering Souls. I actually think Brian has the better late game, so if they play land go, that's really going to favor Brian. I mean, especially because he has cards like Sensei's Divining top.
Shaheen just going to pass the turn back here. And it looks like going to slide in a Vendilion Click. All right. He says, I'm going to target myself, though, not you, assuming this resolves. Supreme Verdict going to go to the bottom. That one's not very good in this matchup. Shaheen will draw a mystery card. And you do see the Karakas available right now. So a bit of the combo action here for Shaheen.
Yeah, he can protect this threat from all of Brian's removal, which is pretty good for him. You're right, Supreme Verdict's pretty dead. It can answer an early entreat. That is about all it does in the matchup.
That one's going to be boarded out very quickly. See, Brian picked up a Force of Will for the turn. And he will pass the turn. No land for him. Shaheen will draw.
No land is a pretty big deal. Especially, this is at its, you know, at the core of this matchup, this is a control mirror. Legacy decks, in general, are not as hard-pressed to find their land drops as standard decks are, but Brian would love to get a fetch land with one of these top spins so he can reset and keep drawing lands.
Well, he found one. It's a Scalding Tarn. Yeah, you make a good point. It's really not like a standard like the Revelation Mirrors where first person to miss their land typically loses.
If you miss land 4 in a Revelation Mirror, you feel like you've lost the game.
No.
And you're like, oh my, this is the worst because you don't have any engines. It's like if you're missing land 4, you're gonna miss something like land 5. You just keep missing lands all along the way. Whereas Brian can do something right. He misses a land, but now thanks to divining top and fetch lands, he's back on track with playing lands every turn. No big deal. It was just one hiccup.
Scalding Tarn's going to sacrifice here and go get Brian a Tundra. Again, he doesn't have to really worry about a card like Wasteland in this matchup, so he's able to search out his non-basic lands pretty safely. Not really worry about all that much.
And gets to have great mana if he wants it.
Going to spin the top now. Take a look at a couple of cards. Leave those on top. This is an Intuition by Shaheen.
In these situations, Intuition is pretty much just getting Lingering Souls for Shaheen. He is becoming, he's trying to aggro out here, and Brian knows it. It draws the Force of Will that Brian had in his hand.
Yeah, the big thing here is removing a Brainstorm. That's actually a pretty big game. Brainstorm, of course, great at all times in Legacy, so that's going to go away. Brian's hand right now, he has a copy of Swords, and he has a Terminus, but Swords is very ineffective right now in the face of Caracas with Vendilion Click. You saw Brian spin the top, and he was going to go to his turn, and Shaheen said, just a second. I think there's a little something I may want to do. All right, never mind. You can take your turn.
Right now, pressure is on Brian. Shaheen could actually just deal 20 with this Caracas Vendilion Click combo.
But that's what I was thinking, too. It's just, it's pretty safe, right? You just keep attacking for 3 in the air, and if anything goes wrong, you just pick it up, and, that's where we actually have the fight.
Right. I mean, the fight starts with Brian having to have 2 kill spells for the Vendilion Click, and then the fight relies on Shaheen not having any counter spells. There are a lot of things that have to happen.
A polluted Delta and an attack for 3. Pretty simple stuff for Shaheen. He's pretty comfortable with his position. Brian's going to keep spinning that top, try to find some help here, but Brian doesn't do anything. He's just going to take 3 more hits, and he's going to die, so.
Yeah, Vendilion Click really important in this matchup. Actually, Brian, the player with more Vendilion Clicks in his deck, he has 3 to Shaheen's 1, but in this game, 1 is really all it takes. And I think more importantly, it's the combo of Vendilion Click and Caracas than just having Vendilion Click.
Brian going to sacrifice a Scalding Tarn, go get himself an island. Shuffle up the deck, which means top can look at some new cards here. Looks like he does need some help. Again, Terminus in the group. We know there's a Swords over there as well. But Brian is definitely in some trouble right now.
If Brian can't kill the Vendilion Click, perhaps he can get a threat of his own going. Remember, he does play Stoneforge Mystics, so if he can get something like Stoneforge for Batterskull out, well, then maybe he can just ignore this damage he's taking, but that does rely on Shaheen not having much in his hand.
Shaheen's going to sacrifice this Polluted Delta. That is going to sacrifice Marsh Flats. Both of those are good to go.
Looks like we're going to get a hardcast Force of Will, and Shaheen cracking both fetch lands so that he can keep that Caracas up at all times for Vendilion Click.
Yep. Smart play there. He says, announce Force of Will, show it off, finish shuffling the deck, and Brian immediately puts the Jason into the graveyard, and all he can do is pass the turn back.
Yeah, this is just such an interesting match to see between these two players. Both of them playing in this control deck, but there's just a lot of tapping out on both sides. This is a lot different than, say, had we seen in the Invitational a Chi Hoi Yim Reed Duke style match.
Oh, Shaheen's going to take the opportunity now that Brian shields are down to resolve his Jace. He's going to Brainstorm, which is what he does best with his Jace, if you ever do watch Shaheen play. Not Fate Sealing all that often. He loves to Brainstorm with Jace. And you can see on Brian's face, he's not thrilled with where he's at as he's going to spin the top.
Yeah, see there, looking top cards. He has found counterbalance to go with that Divining Top, but bigger problem is he's at 4 life right now, and Shaheen has a Jace. So while he has the lock, he always has to have a clean board for that lock to really get him the game, and the board is anything but clean.
Counterbalance is showing up a little late to the party. That doesn't mean he won't deploy it this turn, and it looks like he may just do that. There is counterbalance. Maybe this will force action from Shaheen. Maybe it won't. Looks like Shaheen does have a Force of Will in his hand. And it looks like he's scared enough of that he's going to aggressively counter it.
Yeah, and this is a card that does merit probably a counter spell from Shaheen. Even though he's ahead on the board and probably won't lose to counterbalance, giving Brian that powerful of an interaction means that if something goes wrong here, it will go very wrong. And probably just best for Shaheen to fire off that Force of Will.
There's an attack for 3. And Brian finally says, how about a Sword? Shaheen, of course, going to Caracas that. Doesn't want anything to go poorly here. Jace will have Shaheen brainstorm.
And I think what you're going to see here is you're going to see a really patient Vendilion click from Shaheen. I don't think he's going to bring that click back into play until Karakas is untapped again. I don't think he wants it ever meeting a kill spell.
Inquisition sees a Terminus, and now there is a Stoneforge Mystic. That's going to resolve. He'll grab a Batterskull. This will allow him to, of course, shuffle his deck, so he gets a new look with the Jace, making it a beautiful brainstorm as Brian's going to activate the top on Shaheen's end step. See if he can find anything that helps him here.
The Batterskull was in Shaheen's hand. He used Jace to put it back on top and then refine the card, making sure Stoneforge got its worth.
BBD's going to spin the top on his main phase after drawing a card. Take a look at those cards.
Yeah, and there are a lot of things that Brian needs to do here. First, first order of the business is to stay alive, but after that happens, he's got to get this Jace gone. Not to mention Stoneforge getting Batterskull, putting Batterskull into play could happen. Vendilion click also in Shaheen's hand with the Karakas. A lot of answers and not much time. Miracles is not a deck with huge amounts of life gain.
A couple of cards going to go back. There's a Marsh Flats. Shaheen, of course, setting up to put a Batterskull in play. Still got the Vendilion click at the ready. But that counterbalance makes things a little, yucky.
Yeah, it does mean that Brian can interact with this Vendilion click. If when Shaheen goes for Vendilion click, Brian happens to find a 3, there's not much Shaheen can do to save the click. It's just going to hit the yard. And that kind of interaction is why countertop is so good in this matchup. And if Brian had found it earlier, boy, this game would be very different.
Now, Shaheen did a really nice job of getting underneath it, though. Getting a lot of damage through. Changing the way that Brian's had to play the game. But you can certainly tell that Shaheen respects counterbalance because he so aggressively countered the first one when he was, I feel, pretty far ahead.
Yeah, well, especially with how he played the game, right? He just kept tapping out for creatures, immediately intuition for trying to find some lingering souls, was trying to push damage really quickly because I think he knows that eventually Brian's going to win this countertop war. Like, as you get to turn 10, turn 20, Brian's going to have these 2 cards in play, and when they do, things will go south for Shaheen.
Well, Brian's going to sacrifice the Scalding Tarn. You saw he kind of tapped it and said, okay, Shaheen, do you want to maybe do anything in response to this? Shaheen thought about casting the click, and he said, I think better of it. That's fine. You can shuffle up and deal and spin your top, and we'll see what happens. Not going to make a move just yet. Always, have to fear Terminus from this deck and how it can change the game. But when you're playing against Brian, one thing that you do know is that you don't actually have to worry about Entreat.
Well, Brian's going to hard cast the Terminus, and there are a few outs here. Shaheen's going to put Batterskull into play, let the Germ token get killed. He's going to flash a Vendilion click into play on end step, I have to think here. And Brian's hoping to blind counter on 3.
Hi-ya! It's a
brainstorm. All right, that'll be game.
Playing
Playing to his outs. I like it.
At least he made a show of it. I can respect that. Shaheen Soorani does win game number 1 here over Brian Braun-Duin. Esper Stoneblade is up a game here over Blue White Red Miracles as it's time to move towards the sideboards. And that means we'll take a look at Brian Braun-Duin's, which I have in front of me. And I see 2 Pyroblasts, 2 Stoneforge Mystic to go along with the 2 in his main deck, a Batterskull, a Wear Tear, a Council's Judgment, a Spell Pierce, 2 copies of Rest in Peace, 3 Meddling Mages, a Pithing Needle, and a copy of Humility. Matthias, if you've ever watched Brian play Miracles, you know he's got Stoneforges in the main, additional ones in the board. He's also got a Batterskull main and a Batterskull sideboard. Do you think that has an effect on this matchup?
Seems like a Batterskull, seems like a Stoneforge Mystic style matchup. It's slow. Stoneforge Mystic creates a lot of pressure along with card advantage. Shaheen's going to give him time to draw these Stoneforges. I think Brian will be at 4 after board.
What do you see? Anything else here you see in the sideboard that you like?
Other things he can do. Spell Pierce seems pretty good. There's a lot of, not too much creature action going on in Shaheen's 8 creature deck. Spell Pierce has got to be better than some of the removal he has in here. Outside of that, he has some options. He can play Pithing Needle if he wants to try to. I would say, like, if something like Karakas proves to be a really big issue for him because it doesn't have Wasteland, he can Needle it. Then again, he plays his own Karakas. It's probably a little narrow, but it does help him if he's behind on a Karakas War or a Jace War to have the availability to play Pithing Needle. So it'll be interesting to see if he boards that one in the matchup.
Take a look at Shaheen's sideboard now. Again, he is up a game.
Now, Shaheen always has great sideboards. Okay. Because he has Lingering Souls package, he has 2 Cabal Therapy in his sideboard. They're pretty good here. Now, I think the information in this matchup is actually quite good just on its own, but the fact that he can tear apart a hand with the right draw makes me think he'll be playing these Cabal Therapies. Similarly to other matchups, to Brian's matchup, he has 2 Spell Pierce. Would think that he would be using those. Outside that, here's the one that is very Shaheen of him. He has a pair of Notion Thieves in his sideboard.
I kind of like it.
I mean, so when I think about Notion Thief and Legacy, my general opinion of it is that if you're a disciplined magician and you like winning and wanting to play the correct lists, well, then you really probably shouldn't have Notion Thief in your deck.
I kind of agree.
He's a 3-1 for 4. Like, that is so below the curve for Legacy. I understand the Vanilla Click's a 3-1 for 3, but there's a lot of good things about Vanilla Click. But there are those moments in Magic where you get to play Notion Thief, and they are such sweet of moments where you just get to do real good things. If you haven't Notion Thief to Brainstorm, where you draw 3 and then they put 2 cards from their hand on top of their deck, well,
you haven't lived.
Yeah, I mean, those moments make it worth giving some sideboard slots to Notion Thief.
So here's, I agree with you that overall Notion Thief is, pretty mediocre. One could even argue bad, but
right.
I think that Notion Thief, got bad because what ended up happening is, once Notion Thief was released, everyone's like, dude, I'm going to play one. I'm going to get people.
Right.
And so it was on people's radar. But we haven't really seen Notion Thief in Legacy for a little while. So as a result, it might be off of people's radar. And maybe Shaheen's able to get people again since it hasn't happened for a very long time. Again, I remember reading sideboards for months where it's like, oh, there's the one Notion Thief. I hope I get to see, the beatdown of a lifetime with Jace or Brainstorm. But people moved away from that, and now Shaheen's moving back towards it. So in theory, it could be good again. Maybe catch somebody. I mean, I hope it's good. I want to see it happen.
How much do you want to see Brian? Brian goes for an end step, Terminus, and then Shaheen Notion Thiefs it. He's like, you can't miracle that.
Yeah, I would love that.
There's this category of so the cards I see this the most with is Notion Thief is at 1 and Shadow of Doubt is at number 2. It's these cards that control players oh, I'm gonna get them. Yeah. Let me tell you, if you talk to someone about the card, immediately they're gonna tell you about this real sweet story they had when they cast this card, and now that's why they always play it.
Hey, that's the best part. This is part of what makes Magic a great game. Oh, the stories that we can tell.
My opponent Boseju'd a tooth and nail, and then I Shadow of Doubt at him, and it was great. I said, let it resolve.
Yeah. And then I drew a card.
And I drew a card with it, just for the insult.
Shaheen's going to take a mulligan here pretty quickly. He's going down to 6. Brian looks like he's happy enough with his 7. So game number 2 will be underway here in just a moment. Again, players that we know that are locked in the top 8. Dan Musser, he's playing Miracles. I know you guys watched him last round. James Reekowitz, I imagine, is playing Shardless Bug, as he's typically doing. And then Ross Merriam didn't have a great invitational. Actually, some frustration there, but bounced back really well. He's playing Elves as usual, so he'll be in the top 8.
Yeah. There's a potential that Dan Musser may have to do a little more work. His opponent, Michael Dircho, actually is 9-0, meaning if Michael wants to, he can just play the match.
Try to get the number 1 overall seed.
He has the number 1 overall seed. He's 9-0.
Yeah, he's locked.
But if maybe he wants to go for 10-0. He's locked with a loss. Yep. So not positive there, but I have to think Rinkovich and Ross both drew in.
So you saw Brian start off with the Flooded Strand. He kicked it back over to Shaheen, who did play a copy of Scrubland and then fired off an Inquisition of Kozilek. Brian says, in response, I will sacrifice my Flooded Strand, go down to 19, get a Volcanic Island, and maybe we're going to see a Brainstorm in response. Yes.
Always great against the 1-mana discard here. Brian's going to hide his best cards. We see him draw a slew of cantrips, including a Rest in Peace that he has brought in out of the sideboard.
Quick update for you guys here. David Long on the backup match is playing against the world champion Shahar Shenhar. David Long is playing lands. Shahar is playing Death and Taxes. Not the best time to play against Death and Taxes.
I mean,
to play against lands.
We have seen in Legacy Opens recently as there's been this trend toward, Miracles, Stoneblade, Death and Taxes, Delver, all these fair decks. Lands become a pretty viable choice in the Star City Games Open Series, and it's making appearances in top 8s 1 to 2 times a month now, which is a lot more than we used to see.
Here's the Inquisition. Not 1, but 2 Battered Skulls, along with the Swords of Plowshares, a Council's Judgment, and a Preordain to go along with the Caracas. Of course, Brian hid some of those cards from Shaheen with the Brainstorm, so Shaheen's not working out perfect information, just very good information as he does write these cards down, and we'll see what he takes in just a second.
What's a chance there that when they go get Inquisition of Kozilek with a Brainstorm, that they actually just hide all their cards that cost 3 or less? But here Brian goes the opposite way. I mean, a pair of Batter Skulls. That is a ton of batter skull.
It's a lot of batter skulls. Now, again, these guys are very, very good friends. And again, if you follow Brian at all, you know how he likes to build his miracle decks. He doesn't like and treat the Angels. He's got Stoneforge. He's got batter skulls. He's been doing one batter skull main, one batter skull board for what seems like almost a year now. So this is not unusual, as he will draw a card. It's a copy of Rest in Peace, and he wants that in play very bad. So there goes the graveyards. He wanted to protect that against Shaheen.
Yeah, well, it does take care of the Lingering Souls plan that Shaheen uses. It's an interesting card to board in. Shaheen, like I said, does have Lingering Souls, but he's not that committed to the graveyard. And actually, when Brian boards in Rest in Peace, he probably has to board out his 3 Snapcaster mages that are in the main. There's some collateral hate that he does to himself here.
Brian going to cast the main phase Brainstorm here. It looks like he's got 2 cards split back. The question is, does he have a 3rd land? I do wonder, again, because these guys are such good friends, if they know each other's deck lists. And if Shaheen knows, well, Brian's got Rest in Peace and he boards in against me, so I'll board out my Lingering Souls.
Actually, I should go back here. Sorry, Shaheen is the one with the Snapcaster mages. So Brian is safe to Rest in Peace here.
What Brian doesn't have is a land, and so he is a little bit Brainstorm locked. He's going to draw a card that he already knows about. He's going to try to resolve a Stoneforge Mystic. Shaheen says, absolutely not.
Interesting enough, Shaheen is the player with more Rest in Pieces in the board. Shaheen actually has 3 in his own sideboard, whereas there's 2 in Brian's. So I would think that Shaheen can operate under 1. But here's a card that doesn't use the graveyard.
Not at all.
Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Yeah. You saw Brian kind of shrug his shoulders. Darn it, Jace is in. Shaheen's going to Brainstorm because that's what Shaheen does. He knows that card's not a land, by the way, because it's the 2nd card that Brian draws from the Brainstorm. So Shaheen might Fate Seal now.
Wow.
Oh, my God.
You just lost a card there. You could have had another card.
I've never seen him do it. I've never seen him Fate Seal before. Here's a Thoughtseize. I didn't know he was capable.
Some more batter skulls still hanging out there. In addition to Counterspell, but Brian only on single blue.
Yeah, you can see the swords, of course, the Vendilion Click and the Council's Judgment.
And Council's Judgment and Vendilion Click are the only cards, are some of Brian's few ways to answer Jace the Mind Sculptor, and he's going to be down one of those 2, I would think. If Shaheen can protect the Jace, Shaheen will win the game.
Interesting decision here. I wonder what he's going to take. He doesn't look to be going towards those 3. There go the hands. And there maybe goes he goes with the swords. I'm a little surprised.
What are you up to, Mr. Soorani?
Yeah, he's clearly got a plan. Here's a Brainstorm. 1, 2, and 3. Couple cards being going back here in just a moment.
I mean, the swords is the only castable one, to be fair.
Yeah.
If your plan is to if you know Brian's not drawing lands and your plan is to Fate Seal him off lands for the rest of the game, I mean, might as well take the castable spell.
So I suppose you can control that pretty well too. Intuition. So what this is of course some cards are going to go to the bin here because of Intuition. So they're actually going to get exiled because Rest in Peace is in play. So he's going to lose 2 Stoneforges for good, and 1 Stoneforge is going to stay. So Shaheen is basically trying to come at Brian from 2 angles, right? He's getting a Stoneforge Mystic, which can go get a Batter Skull, and he can say, I'm going to start attacking you, and I'm going to keep chasing you.
And it's pressure, pressure, pressure. This is what Shaheen has done these games. He, rather than sitting back and trying to play a control game, he's just is aggressively getting threats and throwing them at Brian. You see there, it was a Thoughtseize for a Swords to Plowshares. That was trying to clear the way for the Stoneforge that he hadn't gotten yet.
Shaheen's going to Fate Seal again. Take a look. Shaheen says, I don't think so. That's going to the bottom.
That's a land.
It's Brainstorm time for Shaheen again. Again, he did shuffle his library due to Intuition, so these are new cards that he's seeing.
Just when Brian thinks he might be able to Council's Judgment to Jace if he draws a land, Shaheen does the best thing that Jace does is Jace draws more Jaces.
Yep. There's Stoneforge. Time to search. Again, this will give him a shuffle. You mentioned Shaheen taking this very proactive approach, aggressive, aggressive, aggressive. This is the approach that Shaheen always takes, which I love. You know, some people love to play this defensive game with no win conditions. The person next to me, that would be you. I know you don't like to do anything.
You could play a win condition, but you could also just not let them have one, and you'll probably win.
This makes a little sense. How about a Cabal Therapy? Take care of that Vendilion Click. Pass the turn back.
So it leaves with Brian with just Council's Judgment. He does draw the land, though, so he's going to get something. Gets to play a little.
And Brian, I imagine, is like, yes, I drew a land. I get the Council's Judgment away this Jace, but we know the truth.
I mean, Brian's like, well, I can try it. I bet he's more along the lines of, I can try to Council's Judgment with this Jace. And boy, Shaheen sure brainstormed a lot of times. I hope he bricked all of them. Oh, well, Unsurprisingly, he didn't. Here's another Jace.
Guess not.
Hope after these face heals that I draw another Council's Judgment. You know, there's that sort of thing.
Shaheen's going to brainstorm again with Jace.
I suppose Brian's found his third land. No point in using Jace's any other abilities now.
Yeah, and to be fair, Shaheen's got a pretty good idea of what's in Brian's hand at this point. I imagine Shaheen's looking for land number 6 to put Batterskull into play. If Brian does play his Jace, he can pressure it that way. So that is land number 6. It is a fetch land. That does allow him to shuffle, and he's going to sacrifice this right away.
And he might actually put the Batterskull into play immediately. That would dodge a top deck Vendilion click from Brian Braun-Duin.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, right? You can do it now to dodge a Vendilion click, or if you wait, then you get if you do it right away, then you get Terminus. So, you know, there's the potential for it to go wrong either way. Again, that's what makes Miracle so appealing. It makes things tough on the opponent in so many different directions.
Right. Turns out the draw was counterbalanced, so not too much worry for Shaheen. He's just going to get this Batterskull. Yep. No V-click. That means the Germ is in play.
Shaheen, you got to get the Germ token. That's Brian and beat him down with it.
That's his token.
What are you doing? Here's a Thoughtseize. There we go. Counterspell on the Thoughtseize. Give him the business with his own token.
Swinging for 5. Brian's down to 13. And Jace and Shaheen's tap-out control seems to be running away with the game yet again.
Again, Shaheen has always liked taking a proactive approach, even with Esper and Standard. I mean, he was testing versions that had Bramaz, and of course, Bloodbaron with Scopa, just all these creatures, Nightfield Specters in the main deck. He loves to be proactive. He's not the kind of guy who likes to sit around. He likes to put the pressure on the opponent, always. And he's been playing this Esper Stoneblade deck for some time in Legacy. You know, and he's been doing it with Lingering Souls instead of True Nemesis. This is going to resolve a Brainstorm in response to this counterbalance. But this proactive approach, he writes about it all the time. Some people believe in it, some people don't, but the wins always seem to come his way.
Well, regardless of whether it is the correct deck or not correct deck, Shaheen is very adept at playing it. You know, can't argue with his results as he finds himself playing for top 8s frequently.
5 invitational top 8s.
And here comes Notion Thief. No good story to accompany it. It's actually just a beater.
Whatever, beatdowns are cool.
Yeah.
Inquisition. Reveal. Island. Let's see what you got,
Resolves.
Brian.
Here's some batter. Oh, wow. Gotcha.
2 pair.
Gotcha. Inquisition whiffs.
2 pair. Batterskulls and Jaces.
The top card's a land. Hey, top card's a land. He can cast the Jace.
He sure can. Can't brainstorm with it though.
No, he can. He actually will have to unsummon the Germ token, and then the ensuing attack will bring Brian to 1. I mean, he's going to unsummon the Germ token because brainstorming certainly, as I mentioned, isn't any good on this board.
No.
That's. I mean, yeah, that certainly would.
Nah, Shaheen's got. Shaheen's got him in the hardest lock. He's going to cast Lingering Souls. 2 tokens are going to come into play. He knows Brian's card.
Brian is out. Does not have outs here.
Yeah, he knows his card's an island, right? He's got 2 Jaces and 2 Batterskulls. Can't cast either Batterskull. If he casts the Jace, the best he can do is unsummon a token because he can't brainstorm. Brian says, yeah, Brian says, you are not killing me with my token, and that is going to do it. Shaheen Soorani is going to beat Brian Braun to win 2 games to 0. And for Shaheen, he's 8-1-1, and it looks like he's headed into the top 8.
Yeah. So congratulations to Shaheen, 8-1-1. Absolutely right, in our top 8. Brian at 7-2-1 is going to miss probably a top 16 finish in line for him.
Yeah. So Shaheen, we're going to see him later this evening. Hopefully we can move to our backup match between Shahar Shenhar and David Long. David Long on land, Shahar on death and taxes. So we can put 5 people in the top 8 here. Michael Dirkso, Michael Dirkso, Dan Musser, Ross Merriam, James Rinkowitz, Shaheen Soorani. It looks like 5.